It was a normal Friday evening, the kind of shift I had done a dozen times before. I was 19, working at the Walmart near my neighborhood in a small town in the Midwest. The parking lot was slick from rain, and most of the usual customers had already left. I was on a late shift, just counting down the hours until I could go home. I started my evening like any other, checking the shelves in the electronics aisle, straightening headphones, making sure the display TVs weren't all out of place. My manager had left an hour earlier, and the store felt emptier than usual. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a steady background noise that usually didn't bother me. I liked working nights because it was calm. No rush, no crowds, just the soft thump of rain against the windows and the occasional beep of a scanner. Sometimes I'd hum along to music through my earbuds while walking between aisles. It was boring but safe. Except that night, it didn't feel safe. I remember noticing a small detail that seemed out of place at first. The store's automatic doors were supposed to lock after closing, but I could swear I heard the faint click of them opening. I paused, pulling out one earbud. Rain was tapping against the glass, but it wasn't a sound that caught me. It was the stillness of the empty lot outside. No cars, no people. Just a shadow that seemed to shift, almost like someone was watching. I shook my head, thinking I was imagining it. Maybe it was just the reflection of the lights on the wet asphalt, or a trick of the stormy night. Still, the feeling wouldn't go away. My skin prickled. I continued walking down the aisle, trying to focus on my task, but every now and then, I thought I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. A shadow near the end of the aisle, then gone when I looked directly. It didn't make sense. I told myself it was the storm, the flickering lights, my imagination running wild. Then there was the noise, a soft, deliberate footstep on the linoleum floor. Not the hurried step of a customer rushing to the register, but slow, careful. I froze, looking around. The aisle was empty. The store was supposed to be empty. I could feel my heartbeat picking up. My fingers tightened on the scanner I was holding. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a stalker forgot to clock out. Maybe the janitor was late tonight. But the hair on the back of my neck stood straight, and I realized something that made my stomach drop. Whoever it was, they weren't moving randomly. They were following me, just keeping distance, watching. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was all in my head. But then the lights flickered again. And for just a second, I could swear I saw a figure in the aisle across from me, crouched low, staring. Not a normal shopper, not a coworker, something else. And that's when I knew, deep down, this was not going to be a normal shift. After that first unsettling moment in the aisle, I tried to calm myself. I reminded myself that Walmart had always felt safe. I'd worked there a few months now, and late-night shifts were usually quiet, predictable. Most of the time, it was just me and the few employees left after closing, making sure everything was in order before the overnight stalkers came in. The store itself was large, one of those big-box buildings with high ceilings and long fluorescent-lit aisles. The electronics section, where I was standing, was toward the back near the entrance to the storage area. Across the store were the grocery aisles, a few registers still open, and the main entrance where the automatic doors slid silently. On a normal night, I could hear the quiet hum of the refrigeration units in the back or the soft rolling of carts on the polished floor. Tonight, though, the hum seemed louder, almost oppressive, as if it was filling the empty space where people should have been. It was about 9:15 p.m., the storm outside making the store feel isolated. The rain had picked up steadily, drumming against the large front windows, and the occasional flash of lightning made the shadows in the aisles shift. The air smelled faintly of detergent and cardboard, the usual Walmart scent, but it mingled with the wet smell of asphalt and rain coming in from the parking lot. I could see the empty spaces where customers had parked earlier, their headlights gone, leaving only reflections of the store lights on the wet asphalt. I was there because I needed the job like most people my age. Nights were the only shifts that fit my schedule, and honestly, the money was decent for a first job. I'd been trained to stock shelves, organize merchandise, and check inventory. Tonight, my main task was electronics, but I also kept an eye on the registers and the doors, since management liked us to be aware of any issues, especially on stormy nights. Only a few other people were in the store at the time. My manager had already gone home, leaving me as the de facto person in charge of closing the electronics section. There was one night stalker in the back, a guy named Kevin. He usually kept to himself, moving silently between the storage area and the aisles, restocking shelves. I hadn't seen him for a while that evening. Occasionally, I'd hear his voice over the walkie-talkie, checking in, but he hadn't been nearby when I noticed the first shadow. The calm of normal work, the rhythm of checking products, and the quiet of the near-empty store should have been comforting. But the combination of the storm outside, the flickering lights, and that first strange feeling in my chest made the environment feel different. It was still a Walmart, still familiar, but somehow distant, like it was almost a place I had never been before. I moved carefully down the aisle, checking the shelves and arranging boxes, trying to convince myself that nothing was wrong. I could hear the soft squelch of my shoes against the wet floor near the entrance, where people sometimes left puddles. I could see the reflection of the lights in the polished tiles, but something about the way the aisles stretched empty into the back made me uneasy. I knew Kevin was somewhere in the store, but I couldn't see him, and that absence felt heavier than the rain outside. For the first time that evening, I realized just how alone the store actually was. And in that quiet, I started feeling the weight of being watched. I kept moving through the electronics aisle, trying to focus on my tasks, but the feeling that something wasn't right just wouldn't go away. At first, it was little things, boxes that looked slightly shifted, like someone had moved them. I told myself it was probably Kevin or another stalker, just being careful while restocking. But then I noticed the soft sound of footsteps echoing somewhere nearby. Slow, deliberate, not hurried like a customer in a rush. I paused, holding a box of headphones in my hands. The footsteps stopped when I stopped. My heart rate picked up, but I tried to breathe normally. I reminded myself, the store was empty, Kevin was in the back, and the doors were locked. Still, the sound had come from the far end of the aisle, near the storage area. I stepped forward carefully, listening. Then I noticed another detail. The lights overhead flickered for a second. Not the usual quick flicker from a storm outside, but a small, uneven dimming. The shadow it cast along the shelves shifted just enough that I could have sworn it wasn't mine. I stopped again, glancing down the aisle. Nothing. Just empty shelves, clean floors, and the occasional reflection of the fluorescent lights. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was imagining things. But then came the sound of breathing. Just a soft exhale, close. Too close. I froze, looking around. I didn't hear any footsteps this time, only that low, deliberate breath, coming from somewhere in the darkness near the storage area. My stomach twisted. I wasn't alone. I moved again, slowly, keeping my hands empty in case I needed to grab something. My shoes made a faint squelching noise against the wet floor near the entrance, and I realized that even my own movements sounded too loud. Every small noise seemed amplified in the empty store. The storm outside had grown heavier, rain pelting the windows, and I could hear occasional rumbles of thunder echoing through the building. As I walked, I started noticing more strange details. A shadow darted just past the corner of my eye near the display cases. When I turned, nothing was there. I thought I saw a reflection of someone in the glass of the TVs, but it disappeared when I blinked. The aisles seemed longer than usual, emptier, stretching into darkness, where the lights flickered. I started moving faster, trying to stay near the main aisles where I could see the exit. The soft sound of footsteps returned. Again, not my own. They were careful, following, stopping when I stopped, almost like whoever it was playing a game. My fingers tightened around my walkie-talkie, ready to call security, but I didn't want to make noise yet. And then, the unmistakable sense of being watched hit me. I could feel eyes on my back, even though I couldn't see anyone. Every instinct in me screamed that someone was there, hidden among the shelves or crouched near the storage area, waiting. The storm, the flickering lights, the empty store, all of it suddenly felt like a trap. I knew I wasn't imagining it. Something was in the store with me, and it wasn't going to reveal itself until it wanted to. The feeling didn't fade. Near electronics. There was a pause before he answered, his voice crackling back that he was in the back receiving area and hadn't left it in over 30 minutes. That answer made my chest tighten. I stood still, listening. The store felt too quiet now, the kind of quiet where every sound matters. Somewhere down the aisle, something shifted. Not a loud movement, just a careful adjustment, like someone repositioning their weight. I slowly backed toward the end of the aisle, keeping my eyes forward. As I moved, the lights above me dimmed again, longer this time. When they came back on, I noticed something new. A shopping cart stood in the middle of the aisle behind me. I was sure it hadn't been there before. I hadn't heard it roll. It was just there, angled slightly, as if someone had pushed it and let go. My heart started pounding harder. I scanned the surrounding aisles, but I couldn't see anyone. The shelves created long blind spots, tall and tight, perfect for someone to hide behind. I realized how exposed I was. There was nowhere to run without turning my back. Then I heard it clearly. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Coming from the aisle to my left. They stopped when I stopped. When I took another step, they followed. Whoever it was wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. They wanted me to know they were there. I whispered into the walkie-talkie again, asking security to check the cameras. The response came back delayed. The storm was messing with reception. I was on my own for the moment. I moved toward the front of the store, trying to stay in open areas, but the feeling of being boxed in only grew stronger. The lights in the aisle ahead flickered off completely, leaving a dark stretch between me and the registers. I didn't want to cross it, but I didn't want to turn around either. That's when I saw him. Just a shape at first. A tall figure standing at the end of the dark aisle, partially hidden by a shelf. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood there, watching. I couldn't see his face, only the outline of a hood pulled low. I backed away slowly, my hands shaking. The cart behind me rolled an inch forward on its own, scraping softly against the floor. That sound made me flinch. I realized then that he had cut off my path without ever touching me. The distance between us felt smaller now, even though he hadn't stepped closer. The threat was no longer a feeling or a sound. It was real, physical, and trapped inside the store with me. I knew, standing there under the flickering lights, that whatever he wanted, he wasn't planning to leave quietly. I didn't wait to see what he would do next. The moment I realized he was blocking the aisle, I turned and ran. My shoes slipped slightly on the polished floor as I pushed myself forward, heading toward the front of the store. My breathing grew loud in my ears, but I forced myself not to scream. Behind me, I heard movement. Fast now. No longer careful. He broke into a run, his footsteps heavy and uneven, echoing through the empty building. I didn't look back. I focused on the glow of the registers ahead, praying someone was still there. I reached the corner near customer service and nearly crashed into a display. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped my walkie-talkie as I shouted for help. No one answered. The storm outside roared louder, thunder rolling overhead, drowning out my voice. I ducked down an aisle and then another, trying to lose him. I could hear him breathing now, sharp and close, like he was just a few steps behind me. Shelves rattled as he brushed past them. A box fell to the floor somewhere nearby, bursting open. I could feel the vibrations of his footsteps through the tiles. I spotted the employee bathroom at the end of the aisle and sprinted for it. I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it, throwing my weight against it just as he hit the other side. The impact made the door shudder in its frame. I covered my mouth to keep myself quiet, tears stinging my eyes as I struggled to breathe. He didn't speak. He didn't yell. He just stood there. I could see his shadow under the door, unmoving. Then his hand reached down, slowly testing the handle. It rattled once, then again, harder this time. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I crouched on the floor, pulling my phone out with trembling fingers. I called 911, whispering my location and telling them someone was inside the store with me. Every second felt stretched thin. The handle rattled again, followed by a hard kick that sent a jolt through the door. I pressed myself against the wall, bracing for the door to give. Instead, the sound stopped. Silence returned, thick and heavy. I waited, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. Minutes passed. I couldn't tell if he had left or if he was still there, waiting. Then, far in the distance, I heard voices. Shouting. The sound of doors opening. Red and blue lights flashed faintly through the crack under the bathroom door. Someone called my name. When the police finally opened the door, my legs gave out. I hadn't realized how tense I'd been until it was over. I kept looking past them, expecting him to rush back at any moment. But he was gone. The police kept me near the front of the store while they searched the rest of the building. An officer gave me a blanket, even though I wasn't cold. My hands were still shaking, and my ears rang with leftover adrenaline. I watched as they moved through the aisles with flashlights, checking every corner, every storage room, every emergency exit. After about 15 minutes, one of the officers came back with a serious look on his face. He asked me to describe the man again. I told him everything I could remember: the height, the hoodie, the way he moved, how close his breathing had been when he chased me. The officer nodded slowly, then asked me something that made my stomach drop. He asked if I knew the store had a hidden crawl space above the back storage area. I told him no. He explained that they'd found the access panel open. Inside, they discovered food wrappers, empty water bottles, and a thin blanket. Someone had been using it for days, maybe longer. The man hadn't just wandered into the store that night. He had been living there, watching employees, learning routines, waiting for the right moment. Then they found his bag. Inside was duct tape, zip ties, and a small hunting knife. The officer didn't soften his voice when he told me. He said they believed the man had followed employees for weeks, entering the store just before closing and hiding until everyone left. I felt sick realizing how many nights I had worked there, completely unaware. What hit me hardest was the timing. The officer said the man had been seen on camera earlier that evening, standing behind me in electronics, just out of frame. He had stayed there for several minutes, watching, waiting. I had been talking to myself, unaware he was close enough to touch me. They didn't catch him. The storm had knocked out part of the camera system near the back exits. By the time the police arrived, he had already escaped through a maintenance door that hadn't fully latched. The officers believed he had planned his exit in advance, just like everything else. Before they let me leave, one of the officers said something quietly, almost like he didn't want to scare me more than I already was. He said this wasn't the first time the store had issues like this. Other employees had reported strange feelings, missing items, unexplained noises. No one ever connected them. As I sat in my car, staring at the glowing Walmart sign through the rain, the full weight of it hit me. The man hadn't been chasing me randomly. I hadn't interrupted something by accident. I had been chosen. And the worst part wasn't that he had escaped. It was knowing that he had been there long before I noticed him. And that night, he had finally decided to step out of the shadows. I quit that job a week later. I didn't tell anyone the real reason. I just said the hours weren't working for me anymore. The truth was, I couldn't walk back into that building without feeling sick. Every time I passed a Walmart after that, I caught myself scanning the parking lot, the rooftops, the shadows near the doors. Life went back to normal on the surface. I went to a new job. I moved on. But some nights, when the rain hits the windows just right, my mind goes back to that store. I still remember the way the aisles looked under flickering lights, how empty and exposed everything felt. The police called me once, weeks later. They said they never found him. No name, no clear face, no record that matched the evidence they had. The crawl space had been sealed. The cameras were fixed. The store reopened like nothing had happened. People walked in and out every day, completely unaware of what had been hiding above them. What bothers me most isn't the chase. It's the waiting. The officer told me the man had been patient, careful. He knew routines. He knew when people were alone. That means there were probably moments before that night when he was close to someone else. Watching. Deciding. Sometimes I think about the moment I first felt uneasy in the electronics aisle. The shadow. The sound of breathing. I wonder how long he had already been there by then. Was he watching me from above before I even started my shift? Was he already planning what would happen if I didn't run when I did? I still don't know why he chose that night. Or why he chose me. The police couldn't answer that. No one could. Every now and then, I get a strange feeling when I'm in a large store late at night. Not panic, just awareness. I notice the spaces above the shelves, the places no one looks. I listen for footsteps that don't quite match my own. The scariest part is knowing that he wasn't caught, that somewhere he learned from that night, that he walked away in the rain, unseen, just another shadow leaving a brightly lit building. And sometimes, when I'm alone in public places after dark, I can't shake the thought that someone else is standing just out of view, waiting quietly until I stop paying attention again. After everything, I tried to convince myself it was over. I told myself that what happened was rare, that it was bad luck, wrong place at the wrong time.
But fear doesn't work like that.
It doesn't disappear just because time passes. It stays quiet, waiting for moments when you let your guard down. Months later, I went into a different Walmart in a different town. It was late. The store was busy, family shopping, kids running through the aisles. Everything looked normal. But as I walked past the electronics section, that same tight feeling settled in my chest. I looked up without thinking, scanning the tops of the shelves, the dark spaces near the ceiling. Nothing was there. At least, nothing I could see. That night, I dreamed about the crawl space. I dreamed about lying awake above the ceiling tiles, listening to footsteps below, memorizing voices, routines, habits. I woke up with my heart racing, soaked in sweat, feeling watched even in my own bedroom. The police never contacted me again.
No arrest. No updates.
Eventually, the incident faded into paperwork and forgotten reports. But for me, it never really ended. I started noticing things I never paid attention to before. Emergency exits slightly ajar. Doors that didn't latch fully. Shadows that stayed still a second too long. I learned how easy it is for someone to disappear into places people assume are empty. What scares me most is how normal everything looked that night. Bright lights, clean floors, security cameras, a store full of rules and procedures meant to keep people safe. None of it mattered. He had been there anyway, watching, waiting. Sometimes I wonder if he followed the news afterward, if he recognized parts of himself in the story that never fully got told. If he remembered the sound of my footsteps the way I still remember his breathing behind me. I don't know where he went after he left that store. I don't know if he ever tried again.
But I do know this, he didn't panic. He didn't rush.
He escaped calmly, just like he had waited calmly for the right moment to step out of hiding. Even now, years later, when I'm alone in a large building at night, I slow down. I listen. I look up. I trust the feeling in my gut the moment something feels off. Because the scariest truth I learned that night wasn't that someone chased me. It was that he had been there long before I ever noticed him. And there's no way to know how many places like that still exist, where someone is already watching, already waiting, hidden just above the lights, patiently deciding when to come down again.